G'day, come on in, my good friend. We've got a lot to get to in the Man Cave tonight, including, Trump at the UN. Into my veins. It was spectacular. I'm watching it live. I'm loving it. My wife, not so much. But it was a rip tear. I know you've seen it a lot tonight, but I'm going to show you longer chunks of it. Oh, chef's kiss. No doubt there'll be full agreement between Lucy Zelich and Stephen Conroy about it. We'll get to them in a few moments' time. One and only place you'll see Megyn Kelly is on this show. And you know how Charlie Kirk would go to those university campuses, engage with the students? Well, in his honour, Megyn is actually doing that today, American time. You'll see those videos going around the world. A little preview of that a little later. This weekend, we're heading to Western Sydney for the next version of Our Town. Actually, where I went to uni way back when. Last century, kids. There was a world before 2020, believe it or not. All right, if you want to join us, Greater Western Sydney this Sunday. Friends, family, whoever can get there, ourtown at skynews.com.au, ourtown at skynews.com.au. All right, before all of the obvious stuff, can we just talk a little bit about some numbers that came out today? As you know, we have been told the cost of living crisis, it is behind us. We have turned the corner. Inflation, got a 2 in front of it. Nothing to worry about. But, of course, all of that was convenient for an election, right?
We have turned the corner there with inflation.
Under Labor, inflation is down.
And the trend is clear that inflation is much lower than it was when we came to government. Well,
the reality, though, prices, well, they may not be going up by the big chunks they've gone up by over the past few years, but they are still going up. So what you are paying for things in shops, well, it's all more than it was a couple of years ago. No question of it whatsoever, right? Well, guess what? Headline inflation, because we're now after the election, who cares? Government got what it wanted to convince a whole bunch of people that we'd turn the corner. It's now the highest it's been in 12 months. Well done, everyone. Why people fall for this, but they did. The monthly consumer price index comes out. It is now 3%. What is the band of which we must keep between? 2 and 3%. So technically just, ever so just. What was the biggest driver? Electricity prices went up by 25%. 25%. Tobacco, 12%. Alcohol and tobacco, 6%. Education, 5.5%. Non-alcoholic beverages, 4.9%. Housing, 4.5%, food, gas, health, rent, you name it, all of it above that number of 3%. Now, why did electricity prices go up by almost 25%? Well, firstly, as you know, we're trying to move for the grid that worked to the new one, which will make us feel better about 1% of the world's climate problems. And as I told you, in the federal budget, and in the 6 months after the federal budget, and in the months leading into the federal election, the little payment that meant that the 25% increase that you have now paid last month never actually turned up on your bill was in support payments, which really was the federal government just artificially keeping a lid on the increases in power prices. I told you it was just to win an election. They won the election by a country mile. So if people want to turn around, bitch and moan now about their power prices, guess what? This is what they've always been, apart from the falsehood of the Prime Minister and the snake charmer trying to keep things down to make it artificially look like we were getting on top of things. And why does this matter? Because the Reserve Bank is obviously paying attention to the inflation rate. Now, it's not just 1 month. They've got to have 3 between. There might be something crazy that happens in the next 30 days. But the expectation now is, remember how we're going to have 5 interest rate cuts this year? Now, bang, no more. That's it. Enjoy your mortgage as it currently is. Enjoy the python that's turning you purple right now, because you will stay that colour for the next couple of years. Until, of course, the government has to come up with an entirely new way of pretending that everything is awesome in the lead up to the next election. So, Prime Minister is finally going to get his meeting with Donald Trump. No surprise. Always knew it was going to happen, even when everyone was saying, it's never going to happen and it's a terrible reflection on her. Right? 4 years was going to happen. They've found a way and it is going to happen. And the Prime Minister, desperate to show that he was in the proximity of the President today, took a terrible selfie. where he didn't even press focus. It just, so short was their interaction in and around the UN today. Bang, that's it. I've been near him. But it does bring back an old title that I have for the Prime Minister, and that, of course, is Each Way Albo, where he's on both sides of the issue, where he says one thing one day and another thing the next. For example, before he was the Prime Minister, how did he feel about Donald Trump?
We have an alliance with the US, we've got to deal with him, but that doesn't mean that you're uncritical about it. He scares the shit out of me.
Oh, but today, where he is the Prime Minister and he wants to stick it to everyone who thought that he couldn't get a meeting, there's nothing but plus side about the guy who used to scare the out of him.
Look, I'm not a commentator. I'll leave that to you and the columnists. But it was a great privilege to be at the United Nations this morning to hear President Trump and other leaders, the Secretary General of the United Nations and others, put forward their perspectives.
And of course, as you know, during the most recent federal election campaign, anyone with any tangential connection to the President of the United States, the one who now is worth a selfie, worth a meeting, worth saying all of the things that you have just said about the importance of the relationship. Remember what the Labor Party did to campaign successfully for 94 seats in the Parliament, knowing that the majority of Australians don't feel about Trump, certainly as I do, and hopefully you do as well. What did they used to say again about anything Trump-ish?
Today, they've been here making some rather strange comments and policies as well, trying to borrow from another country.
I think they said the quiet bit out loud. Peter Dutton's campaign to be Prime Minister is just a cut and paste from the United States.
People spot the mimicking of policies, people see what's happening overseas, they see Peter Dutton is front bench trying to replicate that here. They're not for it, they're worried about it, they don't want that coming here.
He scares the living out of them. Don't vote for anyone who's going to behave like him. But here's a selfie with him. Talk about having the each-way bet, the each-way elbow of it all. President Trump edition. Fair dinkum, mate. For a bloke who's taken as many selfies as he has, you could have pressed the focus button. P.S. My selfie's better, no question. Now, forget the escalator of it all at the United Nations. If you were lucky enough to be up, around midnight last night, and after you've been seeing readers' shows, which have been fantastic from the United States, congrats to my beautiful Persian princess and so many others involved in that production. Beautiful stuff, right? I love when we go on the road and support all our shows when they do it, because there's a lot of effort behind the scenes. The President turns up at the United Nations. Now, as always, the President turning up's a big deal. Oh, but hang on, what? The escalator didn't work? Of course, there's going to be an international incident around all of this. We'll deal with it a little later. But it was the speech. Now, many people don't remember any speeches which are given at the United Nations because it's all sort of in that language. And I know that the majority of Australians don't have a favourable view of the President. Sadly, there are more people who think, or there are a growing number of people who think we should be closer to China than the United States. Those people can get stuffed. I like the United States being at the top of the table, and I like this bloke being at the top of the table. Do I agree with every single decision that he's ever made? No. Does that automatically mean that I agree with everything he ever said about, Jimmy Kimmel? No. And I know that it may not be the majority view. And I know you may well have seen the 6 p.m. news or lots of other programs here tonight who'll show you a little snippet here and there. It's an hour-long speech. I'm obviously not playing you an hour's worth of highlights. But from the very start, I'm sitting there literally on the edge of my seat like it was the final laps of Bathurst. When I saw this was the start, I knew we were in for an epic steamrolling performance from the President.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter, because the teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you nevertheless, and that way you speak more from the heart. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble. Hello, Madam First Lady. Thank you very much for being here.
So despite the skibbity welcome from the United Nations, and whatever in that pause, wouldn't you love to get a little readout? No, that's too rough. No, that's a bit rude. Kind of hold back a bit. And then you could see that this was one of those speeches, and anyone who's ever watched Donald Trump and likes Donald Trump, right? I don't know that, tweet, anger. Media watch cutting it up as we speak. I like it, all right? I don't mind a wrench every now and then in the process, and I also like somebody who shares many of the values that I think many people watching us and many other people around the world, from supporters of Farage all the way through to Pauline Hanson. They like the cut of this bloke's jib, okay? And when I get it, we're in the minority here. Last time I'm going to say it. Let's just sit back and enjoy the fun, all right? So he worked out that the escalator thing and the teleprompter thing was something worth weaving back into the speech. Anyone, again, who has seen a Trump rally or a Trump speech knows, right? Yeah, okay, there's something written. It's about 15 minutes. Anyone who was an absolute eagle eye would notice that there are 3 lights: green for your on time, yellow for your running out of time, red for your overtime. I think for about 40 minutes of the speech, he didn't care. He was just ignoring the red because he had gold like this.
I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen, but she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations: a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much.
One of the weaves as well, and it is too long to show you, so let me explain. Just out of nowhere, he goes, so years ago there was a real estate developer named Donald J. Trump, and he bid for the right to refurbish the United Nations towers, but you decided, I'd do it for $500 million. You decided to go for somebody else for multiple billions of dollars. He goes on about the floors, the walls, the carpets. Again, appropriate. Be more appropriate. Every now and then, it's nice to see someone just go, you know what? Don't care. Pull the ripcord and see what happens. And as we know, one of the reasons he became the president again was because he pushed back against globalism, and he pushed back against those who believe that a country's culture, a country's language, doesn't matter. Borders, they're invented by somebody else. If you can get there, then you should be allowed in the front door. Well, the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, the big dog says, no, none of that.
Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. In 2024, the UN budgeted $372 million in cash assistance to support an estimated 624,000 migrants journeying into the United States. The UN also provided food, shelter, transportation, and debit cards to illegal aliens. Can you believe that? On the way to infiltrate our southern border. The UN is supposed to stop invasions, not create them, and not finance them.
Again, when he's in this mood, great, right? He's just cooking. He's just bang, 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 knocking all the bull in the china shop. The tail is up and wag. It's fantastic to see. I also love when they have to show the room. And a little bit like the Australian Parliament, they can't just take random shots. If you mention a country, somebody randomly in the control room is trying to find, and the cutaways of these diplomats. Like just sitting there. Just sitting. Now, again, is this going to change anything? No. Why? Because he ain't the king of the world. He may be the leader of the free world, all the rest of it. But as we know, everyone's in their corners, including the people in this country, the United Kingdom, Canada, and his own country. But it is nice to hear every now and then someone say, that what is great about the world is when different parts of the world are different. And that slowly but surely pulling down the borders, taking away the paperwork and letting everyone go wherever they want isn't good for that experience of going from a different part of the world to a different part of the world with its own unique cultures and strengths.
What makes the world so beautiful is that each country is unique. But to stay this way, every sovereign nation must have the right to control their own borders. You have the right to control your borders, as we do now, and to limit the sheer numbers of migrants entering their countries and paid for by the people of that nation that were there and that built that particular nation at the time. They put their blood, sweat, tears, money into that country, and now they're being ruined.
I mean, look, you might not like the temperature. You may not like some of the stuff on the fringes, but the basic argument, I mean, this is the stuff that used to be how the world felt, regardless of where you travelled in the world. This used to be sort of the front and centre. Oh, but now if you believe this, you're on the far right, the ultra-right, the danger, the nationalist right or the Christian nationalist right. Come on, come on. And as you will have heard, he absolutely gave it to issues in and around climate change, the billions of dollars that countries like Australia are spending to transition from systems that have worked to ones that will make us feel better. He is well and truly nowhere near where Australia is. Now, of course, none of this will come up in the leaders' meeting. A couple of reporters might try to sort of get something going, but they're going to like each other. Why? Because they'll be polite to each other. It's not going to be about ideological differences, and those that are sort of sitting around salivating, hoping that there'll be a great fight when they turn up to the White House. Firstly, I don't want that to happen. Secondly, he's backed in people like the Canadian Prime Minister. Remember when Justin Trudeau and that Canadian Prime Minister, I mean, they are as far left and as opposite to Trump as possible, so he would have just kept his mouth shut, let the other bloke win, Conservatives take over sort of all of North America. He doesn't care about anything other than how somebody presents themselves. And the Prime Minister will, even though I'm not a fan, present himself fine in front of it, and the meeting, there'll be no problem, right? But can we just take a second to imagine a debate between our Prime Minister and this President? I think I know who you're going to back.
Energy is another area where the United States is now thriving like never before. We're getting rid of the falsely named renewables. By the way, they're a joke. They don't work. They're too expensive. They're not strong enough to fire up the plants that you need to make your country great. The wind doesn't blow. Those big windmills are so pathetic and so bad, so expensive to operate. And they have to be rebuilt all the time, and they start to rust and rot. And most of them are built in China, and I give China a lot of credit. They build them, but they have very few wind farms. So why is it that they build them and they send them all over the world, but they barely use them? You know what they use? Coal. They use gas. They use almost anything, but they don't like wind. But they sure as hell like selling the windmills. If you don't get away from the green energy scam, your country is going to fail.
Now, again, right? Agree, disagree, all the rest of it, right? But for all of the Harry hit that you end up getting, right, by being somebody who's pro this guy or not anti this guy, this is kind of the reason why you go through all of those discussions and all those debates with the family, just for moments like this, when as opposed to everyone kind of saying nothing, someone said something, and my goodness, he left a mark. Now, back to the escalator of it all, because that's turning into a thing. Now, obviously, it's weird, right? I mean, it sort of works for everyone, doesn't work for them. Oh, lots of cameras and, yeah, sort of a bit of an attempt here. Pretty obvious, someone somewhere. This is an embarrassing thing, right? Will it be the start of World War III? No. But obviously, the president not happy. Firstly, a few jokes publicly, then a couple of things said backstage, and then his press secretary said this evening.
Well, there was some concerning reporting over the weekend from the London Times, as you pointed out, that UN globalist staffers were basically plotting to set up the president of the United States. And first it was the escalator, then it was the teleprompter, and then Katie Pavlich from Town Hall, who we offered a seat in the press pool to cover the president's historic speech today, noticed that the audio inside of the room was much lower and different for the president of the United States than the previous speaker. So when you put all of this together, it doesn't look like a coincidence to me. And I know that we have people, including the United States Secret Service, who are looking into this to try to get to the bottom of it. And if we find that these were UN staffers who were purposefully trying to literally trip up the president and the first lady of the United States, well, there better be accountability for those people. And I will personally see to it, Jesse.
Good.
Diplomatic immunity? I don't know what's going to happen. A spokesperson for the UN says, it was all Trump's fault. The teleprompter and the escalator. I look forward to people. Misinformation, we must ban this discussion from public. It's a bit of fun, okay? Relax. I could have gone on with all that. It was, what a speech, what a speech. Full versions up at skynews.com.au and on our YouTube channel. So, we are often told by people who take over the streets on the weekends what we must care about, what we must worry about, what our main priority should be. From far-flung issues overseas, climate change, you name it. And we're all kind of bored of those protests. Why? Because we've all seen it 1,000 times before. It doesn't really move the needle. Instead, what are we worried about? Survey turned up today in the Australian newspaper done by SEC Newgate, a polling firm, and basically the same size as a news poll, so it's worth having a look at here. Have a look at the graph part of this, right, which goes up and then all the way to the bottom, because that is the change that has happened in terms of social cohesion. In Australia, the best part of 59% say that social cohesion is now poor or very poor. Well done, Prime Minister. Apparently the focus of our government is always about social cohesion. The number one concern, crime. Apparently particularly in Victoria, but we all know, people say this, but then the same government gets re-elected. Also, the amount of pressure that is on families at the moment when it comes to things like cost of living, which brings me back to the most successful US ambassador Australia has ever produced, one of the greatest prime ministers that have ever been, and somebody who got, of course, sacked and then returned to the job by his own colleagues. I'm talking about Karen, of course. And way back when, remember when he said this all the time?
Working families, working families,
working families, working families, working families, working families.
Well, working families. A new amount of data came out from the Bureau of Statistics in the past couple of days, and it shows us about just how many two-parent families, or at least two adult families, that have got somebody working. 2005, working families, was 61% of Australian households. It's now 73% of households, up 11%. Why? Because they've got bills to pay, but haven't we turned the corner? Oh no, that's right, inflation is up again. Power prices, up again. All of that, of course, potentially leads to a material decline in living standards, something that I'm sure gets a mention from the Prime Minister as he goes from leader to leader to leader. And a reminder, he's away for 11 days before or in a couple of weeks going back to the United States after hundreds of millions of dollars at the Pacific Islands Forum. Hence why he calls Airbus Albo home. It fit then, it absolutely fits now. Now, you may remember I was talking about the pension a couple of weeks ago and some changes to deeming rates. Now, this is very complicated for those that are not self-funded retirees or not people who have some other assets that are around, okay? Now, I told you that for the first time in 5 years, deeming rates were going to change, and effectively it means some people's pensions are going to be affected. Now, I don't want to scare anyone. Your pension is not about to disappear. However, if you know the detail behind these numbers, you know what the consequences are. Deeming rates have now changed by 0.5%, okay? The lower deeming rate is now 0.75. The upper deeming rate is 2.75. Thankfully, the same article of which I quote explains who was affected by this. Anyone on income support payments who earns income from financial assets. So this is stuff like shares as opposed to the family home, not counted in all of that. Nearly 70,000 pensioners will see a drop in their fortnightly payments, according to the Department of Social Services. Now, as you know, when it comes to airlines, I love the big V. Love flying Virgin. They've been very good to me for a long time. I'll continue to be very good to them. I get it. Other corporate relationships, my personal one, I like the big V and the beautiful people who bring change to it each and every day. Now, as you know, Virgin said that by Christmas you'll be able to take dogs and cats on planes. Not that thrilled. But what does thrill me was the announcement today. How's this? You will be able to, if the plane is not completely sold out, you will be able to guarantee there'll be no one sitting next to you. This is good for fatties like myself. Almost said something else. Fatties like myself. Virgin Australia is giving passengers more room to stretch out with the launch of its new neighbour-free seating option. The airline said the feature, being rolled out this month, lets travellers enjoy the luxury of an empty seat next to them on selected domestic and short-haul international flights. Passengers can secure a neighbour-free seat either by bidding for the extra space ahead of their flight or purchasing it outright 48 hours from departure. I'm more than happy to be included in that model.